Yes, Kenya. Tamu sana, yes. Calls for the disbandment of the Supreme Court and for the resignation of the 7 Supreme Court justices gathers momentum. And if the courts are to persist, then I'm seeing a very high possibility where the 7 Supreme Court justices might be forced to resign or might be forced out of office. In this video, I want us to have a look at a press statement yesterday by Raila Amolo Odinga yesterday, after which we'll also have a look at some remarks by some of William Ruto's close associates, all calling for the disbandment of the Supreme Court. Listen into this.
Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition is now calling for the entire disbandment of the Supreme Court. In response to the Apex Court's full judgment on presidential election petition, the coalition, through its flag bearer Raila Odinga, took issue with the court's findings and the language of the bench in its determination of the petition. Seth Olale has more.
Comments the hour.
In a statement sent to newsrooms by the coalition's presidential candidate in the August 9th general election, Raila Odinga, the opposition outfit enlists 6 key issues which it claims were intentionally ignored by the 7 bench court in its determination of the 2022 presidential petition. The contentious issues include alleged access to IEBC systems by unauthorized persons, alleged interference with Forms 34As by external parties, alleged forgeries of Forms 34Bs in contrast to original Form 34As, alleged suppression of numbers through postponement of the Mombasa and Kakamega gubernatorial elections, verification and tallying of presidential election results, and whether the winner of the presidential elections attained 50+1% of total votes cast. Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition further alleges that the language used by the Supreme Court judges was devoid of courtesy and sought to bolster the respondent's case while making condescending and denigrating comments against the petitioners and their advocates. Raila Odinga's led opposition coalition further says that the country's democracy is, and I quote, fake, and that the Supreme Court has played one of the biggest roles in making it so. The coalition now alleges that the court is arguably the biggest danger to the quest for a democratic state, and that Kenyans need to consider whether the Supreme Court is serving the purposes for which it was established. Seth Olale, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
Yes, that's Raila Odinga calling for action against the Supreme Court. And then yesterday, Senior Counsellor Nasir Abdullahi, a very close William Ruto ally, also called for the disbandment of the Supreme Court. And also some other leaders have also been calling for the disbandment of the Supreme Court. Leaders both in Azimio and also in Oda, the likes of Nelson Harvey. Quite a good number have been calling for the disbandment of the Supreme Court. And Senior Counsel, even though she is trying to disassociate from Azimio's reasons for calling for the disbandment of the Supreme Court, he is equally calling for the disbandment of the Supreme Court. Nasir Abdullahi, Senior Counsel. The Supreme Court of Kenya badly, urgently needs an overhaul, but not for the silly reasons advanced by Azimio. The blueprint for the court's reforms is in the court's judgment in the Wajir governor's case 2019, where it ruled that governors with the deep pockets don't need a degree. And then Senior Counsel attaches that verdict, the 2022 Supreme First, a critique of the judgment of the Supreme Court of Kenya in presidential election petition number 5 of 2022, Raila Odinga and Martha Karua versus the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, a report from the Azimio Center by Professor Makau Mutua, Paul Mwangi. Senior counsel is calling for the disbandment of the Supreme Court, and he's basing his argument on a verdict in 2019 concerning Wajir governor. Yes, Wajir governor's case in 2019. So it's clear, ladies and gentlemen, that Kenyans across board are calling for the disbandment of the Supreme Court. And senior counsel is just trying to be clever. I know what might have prompted senior counsel to call for that disbandment is because on how the Supreme Court handled this year's 2022 presidential election. Only that is senior counsel is trying to be clever, not to anger William Samoei Ruto. Because if senior counsel believes that the problem of 2019 warranted a disbandment of the Supreme Court, he could have not waited for 2022. So it appears that 2022's Supreme Court's verdict might have also informed senior counsel's decision to call for the disbandment of the Supreme Court. And it's almost very clear for any other person to see that the weakest link now in Kenya, as far as our judiciary is concerned, is the apex court, the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court comes out as the weakest link in the judiciary. The lower courts, the High Court and the Court of Appeal, comes out as more independent, more objective than the apex court. And in fact, if you look at things as they are today, quite a good number of Kenyans, if not a majority, feels that the Supreme Court is not serving its intended purpose. Kenyans have lost faith and trust in that court. And I'm not just seeing a situation in the near future where any sane Kenyan will even dare challenge a presidential election at the Supreme Court. Kenyans have lost hope and trust in that court. And just looking at the kind of verdict they gave for the presidential petition, it's clear from their full ruling, they just fell short of nullifying William Ruto's win. And we are attributing that they were not brave enough to nullify William Ruto's win. But from their recommendations to IBC, it's clear they were all in agreement, or they were agreeing with what petitioners raised. In fact, they were even recommending that foreigners should not have access to IBC servers during elections. But it's very clear that when Julius Soweto raised the issue, they termed it sensational, hot air. And then in the full ruling, in one way or the other, they are admitting that indeed some foreigners gained access to IBC servers. And then in one of their recommendations again to IBC, they were as if they were stripping off the chair of IBC of some powers. An indication that they were also in agreement with the petitioners, Raila Odinga and other petitioners, that indeed Wafula Chebukati overstepped his mandate. And because Wafula Chebukati overstepped his mandate, and Kenyans have all along been speculating that Chebukati and William Samoei Ruto have been reading from the same page even before the election. So by Wafula Chebukati overstepping his mandate, it just means he might have made a declaration favoring William Samoei Ruto. But the Supreme Court nonetheless became blind. They never considered that in their ruling, and they went on to uphold William Ruto's election. And from where I sit, ladies and gentlemen, irrespective of which political side you are, it's clear that the Supreme Court seriously messed up when they upheld William Ruto's election. After all indications were showing that even the IEBC itself that conducted the election, there was a split. majority of the commissioners were against the declaration by Wafula Chebukati. In my honest opinion, that alone was enough for the Supreme Court to nullify William Ruto's election. And even on the issue of the turnout, it's also very clear that the turnout was a moving target. Even the Supreme Court justices themselves, I know they're not even sure what was the final turnout. The turnout kept on moving and changing. It kept on shifting. That alone, ladies and gentlemen, was enough for the Supreme Court to nullify 2022 presidential elections. And I know, ladies and gentlemen, that in the coming years, that's a ruling that a good majority of Kenyans, and even in the international community, that's a ruling that will most likely be seen as one of the Waterloo moments for our judiciary, or rather for the Kenyan judiciary. It was a very big letdown for Kenyans and for the rule of law. The Supreme Court just made a blunder, ladies and gentlemen. And this is why I still maintain and I repeat, the best thing for these 7 Supreme Court justices to do is to tender their resignation. They are coming out as a team that is clearly compromised. They can't deliver to Kenyans as currently constituted. Yes. And if this calls for the disbandment of the Supreme Court persists, then I'm seeing a very high possibility where these 7 Supreme Court justices might just be forced to resign. I'm seeing that high possibility. Let me stop it there. In case you are watching us for the very first time, subscribe, give this video a like. And to any of our fans here who might want to have a chat with me, a discussion, or even to support this channel, I've pinned my number on the comment section. Contact me through the number, or you can send any donation, contribution, or support to the number. Let's meet in our next analysis. God bless you. God bless Kenya.